That is so profound.
I wasn't interested in pursuing that long term.
I was always the friend who my guy friends were trying to go through to get to my other girlfriends.
Learning to be friends with the opposite gender is so powerful.
What's up, guys? It's your boy YLD here with another episode of Relationship Status, where we talk about all things young love. I got two very special guests on the show today, some friends of mine from college. All right. The very first thing we got to do on the show, as you guys know, is we got to ask them, what's your relationship status?
Nico Hasty, I'm currently single and I live in Manhattan.
Jenna, Ergo, also single and also live in Manhattan.
Today's series of topics is going to be pretty, we're going to come deep into this one. We're going to talk about rejection first. It's a topic I know you guys are pretty familiar with.
Hey, you miss all the shots you don't take.
Give us a little bit of background. We'll start with Jenna.
We know.
Yeah, we'll start with Jenna. Tell us a little bit briefly about your experience when it comes generally, dating men, and what rejection kind of means to you in that sense. Let's start there.
My history dating men has not been so successful. I don't even know if I want to say a boyfriend, but I've had someone on and off all through college. He was my boyfriend at a point. And I think since being in New York, dating has been an interesting ride. Some dates where I've gone and I've been like, oh my God, someone can hold a conversation. And other dates where I've made a complete fool of myself. However, I think rejection for me stems from the fact that I unfortunately get attached really quickly. So.
Okay.
That's what I think my history of rejection stems from. And also, I think I'm an all-in person. And if someone's not willing to kind of give me the same energy back, it's a no-go from there.
That's fair. I think that's very fair. And I like how you brought up attachment, because that's actually one of the things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about RPA, rejection, pursuit, and attachment. All right? It's going to be a great episode. It's going to be a great episode. We have a lot to talk about here with these two guests. Nico, how about you give us a little bit about your background when it comes to dating girls, and what does rejection mean to you?
So I also was on and off with a girl in college, and
a singular girl.
For the purpose of this conversation, yes.
Okay.
I would say that I learned a lot about relationships and rejection based on this experience, because I feel like it was very much a lot of highs and lows, and I think for the first time I was the person who was reaching the next step, whereas previously it had usually been where I was I would be rejected from the initial stage, and so this was the first time where the other individual was more interested than I was, and I kind of learned through that relationship is really about stages. It's about where people are in life and in that moment, and it kind of fluctuates. And when it comes to rejection, somebody who can reject you in one moment but be fully into it in another moment, and you have to kind of process that. But I do kind of agree with Jenna's perspective in the way that I definitely throw myself into a relationship very quickly if I'm very into the person, and that's something that I've learned can be kind of stifling. So
it's funny that you say a relationship is all about stages, because it is true. But I guess that knowledge and that acceptance of those stages came with age for me, because I think in college, accepting the fact that my ex-boyfriend and I were in different stages literally threw me for a loop and definitely made me question what was wrong with me, rather than viewing it as like, oh, we're just in different stages. Because at every point, it almost felt like when I was interested in him the most, that's when he was pulling away the most, and vice versa.
Wow. So, I mean, you guys have said a lot in the past minute. I actually really want to unpack it all. First of all, I'm going to point out the dichotomy between how you guys noticed, or how you guys answered the question about rejection, right? Like, you came at it from a lens of, dating, like not speed dating, but when you're talking to people and in that zone, and not just getting the vibe of a certain guy, right? And he was talking about it more from the lens of actually within a relationship that can start off first accepting and then eventually reach a stage of rejection. I didn't even think about it from that lens. I was purely thinking about it from a single person's lens. I think that's a great aspect that you brought up. We're going to dive into that a little bit more. But first let's address Jenna's thought process in terms of like when you were going through, or kind of still are going through the dating process and have seen areas of rejection. What does that look like? Is it like guys are just saying like, hey, I mean, like what? Guys are not texting you back. They're saying I don't want to be in this relationship with you, or they like what does that look like for you? And also, why do you think it's happening? Why do you think it's occurring?
It's interesting because I've faced two different types of rejection for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
One, I think, has to do with my attachment. Is I get really invested, and then all of a sudden I'm putting in so much energy and so much effort, and they're just not reciprocating. Mm. And that, in the end, is just rejection itself from an early stage, and then you kind of watch it like fall out completely, and it be a full rejection. Mm. The other form of rejection I've received is almost like a mutual rejection. I've been on dates where both of us walk out, and like, although we're really sweet to each other, and we're like, oh, it was great meeting you, yada yada yada, the usual. Mm. You kind of both walk away being like, okay, neither of us are going to text each other. And at some point, you just kind of come to the realization that it's just not meant to be.
Yeah.
Wow. But in a way, that's a much more calming feeling because you view it from the lens of, okay, this person is just not right for me, not something is wrong with me or something wrong with them. Whereas like the other form of rejection is like, I think, again, something that's come with age that I've learned how to like kind of reteach myself. But in the early stages is like, why am I not good enough? Especially when you know the person well enough that you also know the people they've been with or they kind of continue to be with, moving on past the relationship you kind of had.
Sorry, expand on that a little bit more, right? Like you now in a more mature setting, how are you viewing rejection?
Obviously, personal experience and personal opinion. This is not for everyone, but in my experience, in the past, rejection kind of came and was correlated to my self-esteem. So if I was rejected, it was like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not good enough? Yada, yada, yada. Now I view it as like, whether they ghost me completely or we have a mutual type of agreement where it's unspoken, I think I've come to realize it's like, not everyone is going to be for you.
Yeah.
You guys might be so compatible on paper, which has happened to me, and then like it just doesn't work out. But I think with growth and maturation, it's kind of come to the point where I'm like, no, like this was a great run for however long it was, 1 date, 5 dates, however long it was. But in the end, we're just not meant for each other. I think with growth and maturation, it's also like acceptance has become something I've really learned with rejection, rather than contemplating and really focusing on it and kind of going through the stages of like, what's wrong with me and how it's more just like, okay, like, although I might get there a little later, in the end, the answer's the same.
Wow. That is so profound. What you just said is so profound. Literally, rejection has now turned into acceptation, right? So like other people rejecting you has turned into you accepting yourself more, right? Like accepting who you are and understanding that not everybody else out there is going to be for you, right? There's a certain level of compatibility that somebody has to have in order for the relationship to work. And I think the more rejection you face, you begin to realize.
This is really rubbing it in.
The different forms of rejection of space led to you eventually having to reach a break point and be like, well, not that you've been through so much rejection. It's like you reach a threshold, but like once you go through, 2 or 3 rejections,
sure.
right? Once you go through 2 or 3 of those, you eventually have to be easy on yourself. And like people are gonna be telling you around like, hey, like, oh, Jenna, like, you're so pretty. Oh, Jenna, you're such a great person. Like, they just weren't for you, right? It's not really gonna click until you actually accept yourself, right? And that's really, really profound. Let's focus a little bit on Nico. Nico, you said something pretty profound as well, in the sense that I didn't really think about it this way. You're starting off accepting the person, right? And then you get to a certain stage. And Jenna, there was something you said about stages too that we get to, but you were talking about stages, and how eventually you can get to a stage where it's no longer accepting, you're actually rejecting the person. What does that look like? Can you explain that a little bit, further?
So I feel like, unfortunately, in my experiences, I feel like in the relationships that I've been in, it's kind of been where we've never been aligned in the moment, in the sense that like when I've been into the person, they haven't been aligned with me. And that can happen even within like if you're actively in a relationship with somebody, because I think there's, with stages come different levels of affection, so to speak. So when I first started with this girl in college, like it was kind of a whirlwind. Like we were talking, we were hooking up. It was a great time, and then I feel like you reach a position inevitably where you're trying to decide where this is going to end up, what the feelings are at the time and place, and it kind of progresses past kind of a shallow experience that is just fireworks at first. So once you reach that stage, you kind of have to think about it and decide whether this is your person or not. And obviously, it doesn't have to be your person for a long period of time. You think relationships, sometimes you have to think in the moment and like what's right for that point in time. But sometimes in that point in time, you could be disjointed, and that's what happened to me. Like I unfortunately did not feel the same way for that person in that moment when she did, but then later on, when I had already decided against pursuing a full relationship with that individual, I realized I was in fact in love with that person, and then enough time had gone by where they didn't feel the same way. So it's kind of it's happens in stages.
Also, I want to point out, and this is absolutely generalization based on the females around me and the males around me, so I don't want to make this, but I do think men in general are better at looking at the present tense of a relationship and like what they need in that moment and like what is best for the relationship as a whole. Whereas a lot of women in my life, again, big generalization, have a tendency to think past the fifth date. Meaning like you just met the person or you've just got into a relationship with them and you're already imagining like you walking down the aisle. Like it just, I don't know what it is, and it might just be the maybe lack of experience of the women in my life, but I do think the guys in my life have a better grasp of what they need in that moment and what is best for them, and as a result they're able to think more clearly, whereas a lot of women in my life think more emotionally.
That is such a profound thing.
It's funny you say that though, because I feel like I've experienced both, because I think one of the most toxic traits I have in this present time is I disregard how different actions I take, what the impression is from the other person. So I had an instance where I took a girl on a date, on a double date with one of my best friends. I did not realize that in that moment she probably realized I was kind of taking it to the next stage, and because you're introducing somebody to your close friends. What number
date was it?
This was, well, that's the problem. So like it was probably like the third or fourth date, but I wasn't interested in pursuing that long term. It was
because I want you to know from my perspective, until you said I was taking it to the next stage, you were just taking her out on a double date with your friend.
Personally, that's how I view it too.
Like I would not have viewed that as like, oh my god, this means something, because like, I don't know about your experience, but in my experience, so many of my girlfriends are like, let's go on a double date because it just makes things easier.
Really?
And maybe it's a first date versus a third date, or a third date versus a fifth date, but like until you explicitly said that, I would not have thought about that at all.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, it also depends on the person, right? Like you and I are people who don't think about that kind of stuff too deeply. I have a friend I know for a fact, like she would never have gone on a double date with somebody on their third or fourth date. Absolutely not. And like she's very safeguarded in terms of like the people knowing about the person that she's talking to. And I think her rationale is more so from the approach that, you know, she wants to keep her life private. She doesn't want people thinking that she's dating around a lot of people, right? Especially given her, given her race and the culture that she's involved in. Like a lot of people may look at that maybe a little bit more weirdly than not. Versus like another race is like, it's like totally cool. Like, we're just going on dates. Like nobody really gives a damn, right? Yeah. But she wants to preserve her image, and also like wants to make sure that like she wants to come off as like a a high quality individual. At least that's how people in that culture would look at a woman. And it's like, if you're with too many guys all the time, they're like, okay, well, you know, I mean, she's just another. I could just get her if I want. Like, she's a little easy, right?
Yeah.
That's how people look at her. Versus people who've only dated one guy or two guys, like, oh wow, she's a little bit more selective. She knows what she wants. She's like, you know, strong-minded. She's probably got goals, etc. Like, you know, so it just really depends on the person, and I that's why I empathize with you know, having that concern after, like, that afterthought. So offline, off of this camera, you were saying, Jenna, that you feel, and I'm sorry, I'm just gonna drop this on these people right about now. You said to me that you feel like you had so many adverse experiences when it comes to relationships, specifically in the idea of pursuit. Like, you're not used to being pursued. Obviously, that's crazy. Like, you know, you're a great person, you're good looking. Like, I don't know why anybody would think. I don't know why the situation is, and that's why I really want to. I want to dive into it and figure out today what's causing that. But yeah. But you said that you feel like you've not been pursued throughout your entire life, so you don't know what it feels like to be pursued.
Yeah.
Right. Nico, I'm not sure if you may have had a similar experience, but
I've never been pursued.
but it kind of sounds like you have. So, let's talk about that. Well, like, let's unpack that. Let's start with Jenna, because you brought this up. You brought this up earlier offline. So, you feel like you haven't been pursued.
I think it's twofold.
I tell you to that.
I think going into college, I had very little experience just with guys in general, just because I did go to an all-girls school in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely played a role in it. But I think it kind of has to do with self-image. I guess college onward is like real life, so we'll do it. Yeah. I think my self-image in college was negative, and I don't think not to like toot my own horn and sound self-conceited, but I don't think I realized how great of a person I was, or if I was good looking or not, or all that.
Absolutely.
So I think it was hard to I couldn't even believe it myself. I had a hard time understanding someone else having that belief about me. And then it kind of was like a perpetuated cycle. Once, like, I was in my past relationship, when he couldn't commit to me, it was kind of like an ongoing cycle of like, okay, if I already think this of myself, and the one person who means the most to me in the world also can't commit to me 100%, something must be off.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one part of it. And maybe I'm not making sense at all. But then another part of it is growing up, or at least this is what I think it's connected to. Growing up, I was always the friend who my guy friends were trying to go through to get to my other girlfriends. So therefore, I very much learned how to become really friendly with people and friendly with guys specifically, because I never assumed they were flirting with me, because the end result every time I thought they were was, oh my God, can you get me with your friend? Or, oh my God, your friend is so hot, or yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. So then I went into college with that same mentality. And then I think post-grad, once I really took a second and stopped focusing on everyone else and focused on myself, I was like, wait a second, like, everything I've been telling myself for the past 22 years isn't necessarily true. Like, obviously I have still so much growth to go through and so much to learn about myself, but at one point or another, it comes down to self-image and self-esteem. And until recently, I don't think I had a high level of that. So therefore, I never could accept the fact that someone was pursuing me, or at least have the confidence to be like, oh yeah, of course that guy was flirting with me, because a lot of the times I would say, yes, of course they were flirting with me, and haha, just kidding, it wasn't. So now, unfortunately, because that is something I have in my head, and it's something I've kind of seen happen, unless someone is very explicit with me, and unless I meet them in a very much a context of, there's no way they want to be my friend, and it's just for romantic purposes or whatever other reasons there would be, I find it very hard to accept the fact that someone's pursuing me. And therefore, I then become the pursuer if I like someone, even though they might be flirting with me.
That's a very interesting, I guess, insight / phenomenon that you're dealing with. I'm trying to have a better understanding. So it seems like you're aware when someone's pursuing you. It's not that you don't know that they're pursuing you, but you don't believe it. Is that what you're trying to say?
Two things. One, it so rarely happened before post-grad, or at least in my head it so rarely happened, that it not only was acceptance, but also like, I just don't think it was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least I didn't believe it.
Like you weren't aware.
I was not aware.
Okay, that was before Post-Grad.
Post-Grad.
Now
I think also as I get older,
Yeah.
the guys around me are also getting older. So
Yeah.
therefore they're a little more mature and a little more explicit in what their intentions are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that plays a role in it as well.
So if they're explicit, they tell you like how they're feeling and they're pursuing you. Like, do you still not believe it?
It's like 50-50. It depends on how I feel that day. Because there are some days when I go out and I'm like, wow, I feel good, I feel hot. Like, whoever speaks to me, even if they're just asking me, pass me a napkin, I'm like, oh, they want me.
Yeah.
But other days, it goes back to like, I have to retrain myself to think not everyone just wants to be my friend. So.
I've definitely experienced some of that, and one thing I've realized through that though, I think like everything, it's a curse and a blessing, because learning to be friends with the opposite gender is so powerful, because there's a lot of guys and girls who don't know how to do that.
Agreed.
And I think that's instrumental to a relationship.
100%. 100% agree with you.
I agree, but I'm also going to disagree.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I agree because in the end, a relationship is just you're with your best friend.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is important, whether like especially if you're in a heterosexual relationship, it's important to be able to befriend and be friends with the opposite gender.
Mm-hmm.
However, in my experience, I also think being very good friends with guys also affects how you view guys in a romantic setting.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
it's true.
As much as I love all my guy friends,
Yeah.
there are some things I never need to hear.
Yeah.
And especially like as I was growing up and like was dealing with self-esteem and self-image issues, at some point or another, you kind of start to absorb a lot of what's being said. And like
Absolutely.
obviously it could be one guy's opinion about what he's interested in, whatever. But once you absorb that, it's like, okay, I'm now thinking of that. I need to be aware of this and I need to be aware of that. And I don't know, at some point you also change your opinion of, in my experience, guys, you kind of see the really negative aspects
Absolutely.
of guys.
I mean, guys.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying.
at
So
the
all of
end
a
of it
sudden
all.
you're like, what? Like,
Yeah.
how am I supposed to find someone who doesn't believe X, Y, and Z? Because every single one of my guy friends is saying like one thing.
Yeah, so let me interject there because I think this is a very important point. I think a lot of girls, especially girls who are friends with guys, have this issue, and I don't necessarily think that it's an equal weighting as to how many guys actually go through that. Because there are a lot of guys. For example, I have a lot of friends that are girls, right? I'm very. It's the reason why I started the show. Like, I'm very empathetic. I love to listen. I love to talk about things, relationship stuff, and guys don't really like to talk about that kind of stuff, right? So I tend to get along really well with girls, and I like a co-ed kind of space. I also went to a co-ed boarding school. Like, I think that a lot of times when a girl is friends with a guy group,
at one point or another, I definitely thought of them in a way that isn't platonic.
That's very much a guy thing.
Yeah.
Period.
It's hard for us, bro. It's hard.
But
It's hard.
one thing, so I have a very close relationship with my twin sister, and
You have a twin sister.
I've never
I think I
seen
knew
this
that,
picture
but
of
I
my twin
also
sister, by the
don't
way.
think
Yeah,
I knew that at the
people
same
are-
time.
shocked. But she's called me crying on a few occasions, and situation has usually, or for some of these instances, has been that there's guys that have pursued her, and friends that have pursued her, and she's actively told them that she's not interested, and they keep trying, and she wants that friendship, but not. So I feel like that has taught me to be respectful in the face of rejection.
Wow.
And I try my best to be. There's been many occasions where I've failed to be, but you have to be respectful in the face of rejection. I feel like guys have to understand that, because there is something beautiful in a relationship, in a friendly platonic relationship with a girl, because you'll get insights to things that you never would have thought of, and plus girls can be better emotional support than some of your guy friends. It's just an honest thing.
100% true. Yeah.
And one of the biggest honors I've ever received is one of my friends, one of my closest girlfriends. I was the first call that she had when her boyfriend cheated on her. She called me first, and that's one of the greatest compliments I've ever received in my life.
Wow.
So it's
Wow. Honestly, wow. First of all, you're a good guy.
I will say that it should be your biggest compliment.
That's
like I have one guy friend,
fantastic.
like my best guy friend, who is like in my favorites, and like I go to him for so much advice because it's so different receiving the opposite end of like what's going on. Because like let's be real, like if I go to my best friend and roommate and I say, hey, listen, like this is what happened, she's like, man, like immediately, like. Whatever it is, but not but more just because it's easy to say like him for sorry.
No.
It's like he sucks for screwing you.
The person is turkey is making
No, it's not that serious. It's not that serious. You can go ahead.
Meaning like screw him for like not being great to you is what she's gonna say, because obviously she's my biggest supporter and fan, whatever. Whereas like I'll go to him and he'll also be like, screw him, but maybe think about it this way. Because you know what? I've been in that situation, and as a guy, I've done X, Y, and Z. And when my best guy friend, who I think the world of, has done the exact same thing, but I now can see it from a different perspective, someone not impacting me, but kind of just seeing it as a story, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. Like, it's not so black and white all the time, and sometimes you need that gray, and that gray, I think you get from having opposite gendered relationships.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Absolutely. This is fantastic. Let's keep it moving.
I have one question.
Go ahead. What's the question?
Do you think guys and girls can actually just be friends?
From my personal experience, I think so. The important thing about relationships with people that are the opposite gender, and I don't know the homosexual experience, so I can't speak on that, but to the gender that you're attracted to, I feel like it requires that you set boundaries from, like, you just because I think, unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, there is an interested party, and usually it's the guy, and you have to, if the girl is sure that in that moment, if she's sure that she's only looking for friendship, you have to set those boundaries. And maybe the guy isn't actively pursuing, but you got to set those boundaries. You got to say, like, hey, like, this is where we're at, and this is where I see ourselves in the future. Once you've set that, and I feel like it's experiences that solidify that. So it's like talking about relationships, being there for that person. And the way I see my female relationships is the way I see my relationship with my sister. Like, I want to be there for that person when something happens. I want to be advice. I want to do all those things. At least that's how I do it. Like, I picture just having another twin sister and just being like, oh, like, I'm gonna be there for you in that respect.
I will say, guys with sisters are a different breed.
It's true.
And it's very apparent.
It's true.
Yes, I agree with that. I'm biased, but
it's true. Guys who have sisters who are close to their sisters.
Yes.
Right, who have been empathetic of their sister experience. Also, guys who, I mean, really, what that comes down to is just guys who have guys who have had the opportunity to observe what it is to be a female or to be a woman in a relationship, right? And to go through all the things that women do go through in relationships, especially at a young age. So, like, when you're exposed to that as a guy, there's a lot of stuff that we don't even realize goes into our subconscious, right? Like, I'm not actively thinking, like, oh, I'm gonna be a better guy, right? But when you become aware or knowledgeable of the things that happen to other people, it gives you the opportunity to empathize, right? Because you begin to understand where they're coming from, put yourself in their shoes, and then you're like, wow, I would feel pretty crappy if that happened to me. And then you don't do it to other people. You don't perpetuate other people because you have a subconscious understanding of how this makes you feel, especially how it makes this woman feel or how a woman feels, right? Okay, so let's move on to attachment. And offline, Nico was just saying something now about attachment and how his experience pertains to that. So why don't you kick it off there?
Yeah, with every relationship, I feel like there has to be a balance, and when there's a balance, it's going great. But when there's an imbalance and one side is putting in less work than the other, then somebody has to fill that in. And unfortunately, the reality is that people will do that to maintain that balance because they want to be in that relationship.
I agree with that, and unfortunately, I feel like I tend to be the person putting in that extra effort when I feel that someone's pulling away. And I feel like it really, really sucks, but I want your guys' opinion on, this is obviously early in the relationship, so like you're dating, not in a relationship, because I think it's very different. But this idea of like girls playing hard to get versus a girl just being like, I'm here, take it or leave it. Because I think I've constantly been told my entire life, especially from like, I don't even know where that went, a lot of my guy friends, that it's like, guys don't want a girl to be at their beck and call about anything. But at the same time, like, as a female, but also just like a human being, I'm so freaking tired of playing the like, oh my god, he texted me at 2, I must wait an hour.
It gets
until
old.
Because at some point or another, it's like, why are we putting up with that? Like,
it gets old.
Like, think about your best friend. When obviously you don't want someone, just like human nature, you don't want someone who's just so available, especially at the beginning. But at the same time, you also want to be texting a friend. You don't want it to be such a, I don't know. What are you guys, that was not a clear sentence. But
no, it's very clear.
What are your guys' thoughts on that? Because I've heard both things, but at the same time, I feel like...
So my perspective with that is, ever since that college relationship, I've very much had very shallow relationships. Even though I've never had a one-night stand, they've just been like very shallow sexual relationships. And I've thrived off of feigning uninterest. And I feel like, I hate to say it, but I feel like it's just the reality. Like, if you come into a relationship, and I've definitely done this, too hot, too interested, the other person is put off. But I think, again, it goes back to stages. Because if you bring that energy with somebody that reciprocates and who's actually on the same level, then it works out. I think for a lot of the pursuit of shallow relationships, a requirement is to feign uninterest from one party or the other. Because a lot of shallow relationships are in imbalance.
And that goes back to rejection and acceptance. Because
full circle.
If you're giving your full energy to someone who's just not at that stage, you're going to get rejected regardless of whether or not you are
best person in the world or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where the acceptance comes in, because you realize it's not, if I'm willing to give 100%, I'm looking for a relationship, I'm not looking for a shallow sexual relationship, you kind of come to accept that not everyone's on the same page.
But one thing I'll add is, this is something I do a lot with mutual friends, and it's worked some ways and it hasn't worked in other circumstances. But I feel like when it comes to somebody who is an established member of a friend group that I know of or one that I'm in, I try to elevate the bar a little bit, in the sense that, like, and honestly, this is going back to what I said earlier about how different people interpret different things. Like, I feel like when it's somebody that I know knows people around me, I owe that person a different level of respect and a different level of experience than I would someone I would meet in another setting. And that's, I don't know, it's definitely for, pardon the expression.
I was about to say you're every girl wants, because that's literally, they think about that level of respect that should be different.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry that it has screwed you over in the past.
See, this is now another topic that I wanted to get into, right? And I think this is where we're going to end it off, because it's been a great episode so far. But the idea of a lover boy, right? That's how I think about you, to be very honest.
What is a lover boy?
A lover boy. I think about
a
lover boy is someone who, genuinely enjoys the idea of romance, right, as a man. And genuinely respects women, but maybe not respects them too much, but maybe does a little too much, maybe goes into a little too hard, right? Because and it's not that any fault of Nico. I mean, I was definitely this guy before. Like, I was definitely this guy in high school, for sure.
Oh, in high school.
Yeah, for sure. I was definitely this guy in high school. Like, you have a false, you don't have a holistic understanding of what a woman really wants, right? Like,
I don't even think women have a holistic understanding of
what they really want. I mean, and that's part of the point, right? Part of knowing what a woman really wants is also identifying that she doesn't know what she wants. So you kind of have to it's all about how you frame it, and it's all about how you position the situation to also influence her into thinking, okay, and it sounds manipulative.
I was about to say.
Yeah, it sounds very manipulative. But sometimes I think it's not the idea that women maybe don't know what they want, but it's also maybe they just want to be surprised. Maybe they don't have a necessary.
Yes.
This is a playbook of how to always talk to me, right? They want a guy to be creative, they want a guy to be innovative, right? They want to come, right? But there's a balance. You can't go in too hot, chocolates, flowers, dates, movies. I'm here for you, calling up until 24. You know what I mean?
But don't forget to do all.
But don't forget to do that throughout the process, right? What is that balance, right? But it's just eventually you're gonna take someone for granted if they're throwing everything all at once, right? Stuff has to come in stages, and people don't deserve to see all of what you have to offer in the very beginning of the relationship, right? They want something looking forward to. They want, they don't want to feel like they just got it all just by being. Also, another point is they don't want to feel like they just got it all from you just by being themselves. They want to feel like they have to work for something good. Yeah. And if you just give it to them all, or give it all to them at once, oh, well, then he's probably doing this with every girl, or he's probably very easy, you know what I mean? So what's that balance? Nico, in your experience, have you found it? Do you feel like you're at that point where you feel or do you still feel like when you like a girl, you're kind of going in? Or do you feel like that works now? What's your idea on this whole thing?
So this is going to be very depressing, but I actually have, in recent times, not been into a girl enough to... So I feel like that's the thing is I haven't been into a girl enough to do all those things. And this is why this is a therapy session. I do it with girls that I don't feel that way about, the extra, because I get pleasure out of doing that.
That's Loverboy 2.0.
But see, that's also the thing is and I feel like a lot of guys go through this.
Yeah.
The lover boy in you goes dormant until you find the right person. Because when you're young and innocent, middle school and high school and college, to a certain extent, I think college took it out of me. You come into every relationship innocent, to where I remember the first girl I fell in love with in middle school, and it was all butterflies, all when they say the honeymoon stage, that was all it was, because we hadn't been exposed to the unfortunate circumstances of how certain relationships or a lot of relationships end. What's also the idea that you don't think that relationship, there's no end to that relationship in that moment. So you're fully in it and you're being your true self with that other person because you've never been hurt.
This definitely happened to me. I was 13, 14.
So that part of me has been dormant since college in terms of feeling that emotion. But there are times where if I see a girl that I think deserves it, even though I don't feel that way, I'll do that for her.
But based on what you just said, what brings that out?
Yeah,
what about that
last part?
This is going to be really bad. I'm never on TikTok, but when I am on TikTok, do you know the song by Taylor Swift, maybe got lost in translation, maybe I asked for too much?
Oh, no, that's it.
People are literally I recently saw one where it's when he told me he didn't have a girlfriend, but then ended up having a girlfriend, did it get lost in translation when he said he didn't have a girlfriend, or was I just not getting it?
Yeah. So
it's there are people going into these relationships all in. You're thinking, oh my gosh, this is it, this could be it, and then the next day they're haha, just kidding.
Yeah.
And it happened to people I know recently. After the seventh date, not even the first two. So it's you think it's leading somewhere, and then you're kind of just left thinking what went wrong, and you don't get an explanation.
Why would someone show affection first, right? Initiate affection just to dip. I can't see any pure motive behind that besides that person's just an a-hole. Is there anything other than that? Am I unpacking that properly? Literally, there's not why would you kiss somebody and leave? Why would you initiate the move and then it's not you hooked up with them fully it was a one night stand. You were talking to them, they made the first move to take to the next level, and then they dash. Maybe the only thing I can think about is indecisiveness, right? In the moment I'm feeling it, and then you know what? Oh, I'm not feeling it when I get home. Or maybe I went to go and talk to one of my friends, and they're yo, he's what? He's you need to go address the situation, right? Maybe that's what it is. Other than that, That's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Do you guys think, as guys, your friends influence your decision on who you're dating?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not for me.
We'll go
But
back.
for a regular guy, yeah.
No, but go back, even like before.
Like back in high school, yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely. I don't really know her that well, and I know my guys, and I trust my guy's opinion. And if he says, "Yo, she's not great," there must be some reasons for that, and I trust his judgment. Now, it comes down to whether or not you trust your friend's judgment or not. If you are in a friend group and you don't trust your judgment, likely the guy's not going to listen to any of their friends. I have tons of friends like that who don't give a damn what any of their guys think, and they bring the girl over anyway. And they'll bring them to every trip, and they'll bring them to every dinner.
You're trying to remind you.
I know you don't. Yeah, offline. But basically, yeah. There's guys like that, and then there's other guys, who really, really care. What would you say, Nico? Are you the type of guy who really cares, or do you kind of go on your solo dildos?
I'm
sorry, can you repeat what you just said?
Solo dildos?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've started to care less. I'll be honest. Like I think in college I went through a period, and in high school where I actively asked for advice from my friends.
Yeah.
But I trust my instinct. I trust my judgment. I do go to them when it's something serious. I'm out of ideas, and I'm like, what do I do? But most of the time, I feel like recently, I just trust myself in the moment.
Yeah, especially at this age.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, when you were younger, you would feel like that had a heavy influence,
Yeah.
As you're around.
Yeah, just because I feel like they're your people. Especially in college, you're outside of your house for the longest time you ever experienced.
Yeah.
Your parents aren't there. So who do you look to? Your friends.
Yeah. People spend most time.
I do think it comes with growth and maturity, but I think I also asked that question with a saltiness inside, because I definitely believe, and I don't know if you guys have this from a guy's perspective, my past relationship would have lasted significantly longer.
Wow.
If it wasn't for his guy friends.
Wow.
Who were also my guy friends.
Really?
Yeah. And the thing is, my guy friends say it. Because it honestly comes, it's...
What's crazy is, dude, you were, you didn't do anything. You weren't in the wrong. You were never in the wrong.
It's funny because, yes, there was a lot that I was not in the wrong for, but But I think looking back now, there were definitely things I could have done differently that I think would have influenced, meaning, I think I was in the wrong at times. I think, obviously, I was saying, my self-image, self-esteem, I think I needed more support, and I don't think I communicated that explicitly and went about it in a different way. And, that probably got annoying. I think there were some things that I also did in the end that were, retaliation against things he had done, and, that's also not healthy. So,
yeah,
although there were a lot of things that I won't sit here and say they were great, because there were some things that were explicitly wrong, I won't put 100% of the blame on him. Because I do think as I got older and got more mature and I kind of removed myself from the relationship, I realized there were a lot of things that I could have done differently to improve the relationship as well.
Yeah, but personally, how I view it at the same time is I understand what you're saying, and that it wasn't 100% maybe his fault. Maybe it was 90% his fault.
There were some things that were 100% his fault, but other things.
I'm talking as a general matter. Maybe even if it was let's say a low number would be 70% his fault, right? At the end of the day, people make general mistakes, right, in relationships, which you're probably referencing, right? Oh, there are some things I could have done better, right? There's a difference between things you could have done better and things that should not have happened during a relationship, right? And I feel like what you went through, there are several things that should just never have occurred, right? Never have occurred. And honestly, you're very justified in maybe the 20% of the things you did wrong, because you're imperfect as a human being, especially when you go through that amount of stress and you go through that much adversity in a relationship. You are justified in the fact that you are going to mess up even more so than you maybe initially anticipated. So, I want to release a lot of that pressure off you, because I know you're probably sitting at home thinking, oh, I could have done better. I could have done. No, that was Jenna, you're a good person, and I want you to know that. And I want women out there to know that too. You don't have to make excuses, for yourself and try to make the situation lighter than or lighter than it really was, right? Because the truth is that some men out there, and some women too, like this is on both sides. So I guess I'm talking to both genders. Like, there are people out here who legitimately don't care, like when they're in a relationship, and then people who do care, and maybe they make mistakes, right? And I want to make sure that there's a large distinction between those two people, because the person who ends up like making like slight mistakes, but actually ended up being a good person for a relationship tends to like take a lot of, they tend to be very heavy on themselves and tend to blame themselves a lot for minuscule things when they don't really fully realize how traumatizing the experience may really been, right? And me not specifically speaking to your situation, but this impacts a lot of people. I know this impacted me at a point in time. So I want to make that very clear to out there to people. Like, you don't need to make excuses for people who didn't treat you properly, right? All right, so I mean, we talked about a lot here. Nico, Jenna, this has been great. Do you have any final takeaways, things you guys want to add on? Give me some advice out here to the people.
I mean, I feel like going through and speaking about relationships and how they end, I really think cheating is a form of cowardice, and like, because it's the fact that you can't face yourself and the other person, because you're in a relationship that obviously you're not into enough to where you see other you're tempted to be with somebody else. And of course, if you're in a polygamous relationship, like, props to you, the fact that you can do that. That's outside of this, but you owe somebody your time and respect, and with respect comes adhering to certain realities. So if you can't keep up with those realities, then you shouldn't be in a relationship. So if you can't face somebody and tell them that you can't be in a relationship because you can't keep up those realities,
100%.
that's your problem.
100%.
In addition to it being like a broken contract or dishonesty, when that happens, and like, let's say they do find out, or honestly, like, there are so many different things that could be considered cheating also. What other than the explicit thing you think of, like, at the end of the day, like, you're breaking someone's trust, and that affects someone for a very long time.
Very.
I hope to think that I haven't experienced it explicitly, meaning I don't know if I've ever been cheated on. But I can only imagine what the feeling is if you were to find out. Yeah. So I can't really speak too much to it because I haven't had that experience. But I know what it's like to watch someone you're in love with flirt with someone in front of you.
Yeah.
And it's the worst feeling in the world. So I can only imagine what the explicit knowledge of something happening, like, and how that affects someone. So.
All right. Well, this has been another fantastic episode of Relationship Status, where we've talked about so much today. This is a really great episode. I actually really do like it. We talked about rejection, pursuit, and attachment. RPA. Go home with that. It's a normal thing. All the 3 things that we just said. Very normal. These are very normal people I hang out with on a very regular basis. But another great episode of Relationship Status. We'll catch you next week.